Well, great to be with you. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, of course.
How's life?
Life is good. Busy. Very busy. But that's nothing new.
Yeah.
A lot of here, a lot of there. But I think the challenge right now is finding, I don't know, just not getting lost in all the busyness and remembering that we all die and what's really just important about putting one foot in front of another. But things are really good. There's a lot. I'm really excited because we're at just a really exciting time with like the Ram Dass project and stuff. It's finally coming to completion at the end of the summer. And that's really, really exciting. It's been a long journey.
Yeah, chapter 3, when's that coming out?
Like a couple of days.
Wow.
The solstice. I don't know when people hear this, but the summer solstice and then the whole thing on August 9th.
It is so beautiful.
It started like a year ago, so it's been a journey. I mean, even before that, when we kind of started setting it up, but like actually recording with Ram Dass was a year ago from today. 2 days, and a year and 2 days ago. And so it's really cool to like have an idea and have nothing, and then to be putting together all these musicians and music and stuff. It's great.
It really is exquisite. I've been listening to it on repeat, and it's one of those timeless pieces, I think, that gets better every time you listen to it. And I think you've mentioned it before, like get good headphones on, get it on good speakers. Because the nuances are spectacular. I mean, when you've got them on good headphones or good speakers, it's like a multi-dimensional experiences. I don't know how you've created it. Maybe you can speak a little bit about how you did create it, because it feels like sounds aren't just coming from left and right, but like up and down and all around. Back
it's very
and front.
detailed. Yeah. The mixing, I'm really proud of the mixing and the quality of the recording. And that's something that's just important to me. So we spent a lot of time, with really good signal paths it's mostly acoustic instruments aside from the drum programming. So it's also, we spent a lot of time. I was really dedicated to bringing in things like stand-up bass instead of something synthesized or on MIDI or whatever, because it adds a richness and depth to it. And so when all when all that combines, and you've been doing it all along the process, starting from the original concept with Ram Dass was like, look, I want to go there not just because I want to capture like his words now for a certain relevancy, like what does he want to talk about that's relevant to today? That was important, but also like I wanted to put a really nice condenser mic in front of him and get a really high quality of him in his study in his home. And that was really important to me. And so I think that, because that's kind of the central character in the record is Ram Dass. And there aren't a lot of recordings out there of him that are of that kind of fidelity.
I agree.
Yeah, there's 50,000 hours of him talking, but I'm sort of a snob about the fidelity stuff. And then I was able to take that recording of him and clean it up in a way so it's really like all the background sounds and all the little mouthy schmutzy stuff. It's just pure, unadulterated, full-throated Ram Dass. And I like that it's him where he was at a year ago, I suppose.
Yeah, it has many times, countless times, brought tears to my eyes and to Joe's as well. We're even listening to it on our drive up here, and just regularly dropping into just tears of awe, not only because we have such love for Ram Dass, but the way you have utilized the music to really complement the transmission that he is creating. You've done that masterfully. It's not taking away from it. It's not overshadowing it. It's amplifying the beauty that he transmits. And,
it does amplify it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he gave me such gold that it made it a lot easier for me to work with it. All I had to do, it was really great on its own. And I knew as soon as we were done, after I heard the content, I just couldn't believe how good. I knew it'd be good, but I didn't think it would be that complete and concise, because I didn't really do much to it. I didn't like rearrange things, of course. I barely cut out things. It's really like almost 95% of what we talked about is there in the order that he said it. And that was just, so really songs like Dark Thoughts or Nature, I'm Loving Awareness. He really had like that perfect opener, the perfect little poetic rise with imagery and then the tag, and it was like 1 minute of content. Once it was all truncated down, it might have taken half an hour to say it, but in his mind, it was all there. And that was really touching and stunning to witness.
How did the Ram Dass connection come up for you on your journey?
Well, he's been like a lot of people, a teacher of mine that I hadn't met through his books and mostly his talks. So he was just a big figure in my life. I think something about secular spirituality mixed with his history with psychedelics and sort of the intellectual angle from Harvard, it all really resonated with me. And he's a wonderful speaker and very entertaining and so forth. So he was in my life, and I just had the idea of doing a record with like a bunch of spiritual teachers, and including him. And my manager, we had a meeting about it, Tim, and he's like, well, maybe you should just focus on Ram Dass and just do a whole record of just Ram Dass. And I thought, well, yeah, that would be amazing, but we'd have to get permission, you know? And as fate would have it, eventually I met Raghu Marcus by doing a podcast with him on his show. And so we kind of met each other and got to know each other, and I just pitched him the idea. And it's just one of those right timing things. I think a lot of people have been thinking about doing stuff like this, but maybe like one song or something. And my idea was A, to do a whole album, but B, to bring in an amalgamation of other artists, like featured artists. So I think they thought, well, that could kind of kill two birds with one stone because you can kind of organize this. And it just went from there. You know, it unfolded. And then eventually I had to make the pitch to say, well, I think I need to go there in person and record new teachings. And that was sort of a hump to get over. But all along, Ram Dass has been totally game. You know, if I'm 88 and I'm sitting in my place and I've talked for 50,000 hours, I've recorded things, I think the easy or natural response would be like, look, bro, it's all good. Just go have at it. Go into the archives. And instead, he didn't question it at all. He's just like, of course. All right. So what are the questions?
Yeah.
And I'll do more teaching. And that's where he's at.
Raghu Marcus often speaks of Ram Dass getting re-youthed, like even though he's getting older, and
he's very energized. Yeah, and it was really wonderful to watch because everyone around him, it's their job to kind of help him and protect him. But I saw him just being so joyful and energized, getting into those spaces. I felt like he could have gone on longer.
Yeah.
We had 2 days of actually recording, and I could tell he wanted to do more and more, but had to kind of honor his time too.
Now, I think I've heard you speak about your experiences with psychedelics, psilocybin in particular, and you were finding that the incredible experiences you were having were beautiful and they were opening you up, but then there came a point where you really felt the need for a teacher. Can you speak a little bit about that? Because I think it is a common situation with psychedelics becoming really accessible and almost mainstream, you could say, especially from my vantage point. I'm also finding a lot of people running into a kind of, you could call it a dead end or just a conundrum of the medicine opening them up, but it's like, then what? Then what? Like the integration, the embodying of the peak experiences that are accessible. Can you just speak a little bit about your experiences of early days with psychedelics and then the bringing it into a more of an integrative approach with a teacher and maybe Ram Dass and so forth?
Well, I would push back a little bit to the sense that I felt like I really needed a teacher. I would say that probably would have benefited me a lot. I didn't have a singular teacher. And looking backwards, I think that has helped me because it forced me to cull together a lot of different traditions and ideas, both musically and spiritually. To this day, I still think I would benefit from a lineage, but there seems to be a deep resistance on my part to being told what to do and just like one path. There's a lot to pull from out there. That being said, to play devil's advocate to that, absolutely. If anything, there's like information sickness. There's so much to learn. There's also so much bullshit out there that it's hard for people to know like what's really real or what's valuable to them or what's going to be their doorway in. It's different for different people. And we live in a time that is incredibly unique and singular in that some of these old teachings and paths, they were designed for a different time. And so I'm always very conscious about, well, how does that fit into my life today? That's not to discount at all, like, for instance, Tibetan Buddhism or any of these, or yoga or any of this. So I'm not trying to pretend that, like, I know more than that. I absolutely don't. But I know for me, what's wonderful about psychedelics is that they give you a felt experience. It's not an idea. And the first ones I had, I didn't understand them. And not that I ever really do understand it, but it provided me with a sense of just having a felt experience of something larger than myself, really breaking through a very tough shell that I had of what consensus reality is. And I don't think I would have believed anything otherwise, any other way. I couldn't have slowly gone through an ashram or a meditation practice. I needed to see the other side first, so to speak, and know that there was things I could access that I really had hitherto not understood before. So in that sense, I find them to be incredible catalysts for certain people, certainly myself. And from that, you're right, what you do with it is everything, because they're not a panacea and it's not something that's going to fix you. It's just something that puts you in a space where you have perspective and you see things and you learn things, but you make choices about what you do with it. So from there, being surrounded by friends and community and resources that can help you make those choices, it may be a spiritual lineage, but also just may be like someone keeping you on task just to like make better choices in your life. It's so individual and specific. All I know is that these things are on the planet and they interface with our brains and our bodies in such an incredible, strange way. And a lot of them with very little toxicity, like with psilocybin, less than coffee. Why? And why is that? And why does it take us where I don't know. And for anyone who's gotten into the deeper realms of that space, I mean, no one knows. It's just this incredible, ineffable space that is like a different octave of our consciousness. That's a real gift to be able to get a taste of, to help you not feel so separate. So I'm a little more focused on the tools that can help people in that experience so that they can have a positive experience. What they do with that afterwards or how, there are many ways to skin the cat, and that almost infinite. And they all speak to the same thing in a positive way. So it's sort of like, well, which one works for you? Try things, you know. Because I'm not the expert in any of that, I really am more focused in my expertise is in how to provide people with a positive experience, whether in the psychedelic space, which I'd say is more extreme end of the spectrum, or the meditative space, or the yogic space, or the trance space, which is like, like sleep and that right before sleep, or the relaxed state. I'm just always interested in ways of going into the inner space. However deep that inner space is, that's where my interest lies personally. And that's why I made that music for me to personally help really as a salve and a balm for all this stuff coming from the outside at me. And I was like, I need to cultivate that inner life so that I feel like I can just be more resilient and find a more beautiful way to walk the walk.
Beautiful. Yeah, beautifully articulated. On that note, your newest album, what's the title? Music for Mushrooms.
Music for Mushrooms, yes. A soundtrack for the psychedelic practitioner.
Again, exquisite. And what I'm feeling with that, I don't know if it's because I've done psychedelics quite a bit and the kind of, you could say, portal is open, so to speak. But I feel just listening to that, especially in a really intentionalized environment, getting still and really paying attention, not just doing it while driving, which is good as well, but really...
doing the mushrooms while driving?
The music.
Okay, good.
Not the mushrooms, no. But the album.
Yeah.
And I'm finding it really being a powerful tool to unlock the psychedelic experience without the psychedelic. Again, I don't know if it's because I have I'm very sensitive to psychedelics now.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, and it really doesn't take much. And even when a lot of people are microdosing these days, like even a microdose, like I'm in it. And I find that album puts me in it very quickly. Not quite as strong, can kind of bring myself out if I want to, but if I want to go in, it's a really powerful tool to take one into those domains, huh?
Well, from, I guess, on the more metaphysical level, like I could talk about, sort of the musicology things going on in that, but really on a broader sense, it was recorded inside a psilocybin ceremony and it's improvised. So it's imbued with the medicine.
Right.
And at its best, I hope this isn't too far of a reach for people, but it's the mushroom speaking through me musically.
Sure.
So if you feel like, I often feel that when you ingest something like mushrooms, they take you to a space that is somewhat transcendent of time. And so after the, quote, high comes down, you've ingested this sort of energy and this spirit. There's a communication that now is different than time that you can work with all the time. And it's no different in some ways than how people work with, say, the Maharaji or a guru or Jesus. But it's something you can kind of tap into. So for yourself, feeling sensitive like that makes sense that like the music can kind of like pull back the veil a little more easily, where you're just in touch with something that's always there. It's not like you have to take mushrooms necessarily to be there again. It's sort of always there in a way. It's something that is universal.
Yeah. Even being here, I'm feeling it unlocking that experience being here. Being in the mountains, being near the snow is very unusual for me, being brought up in the desert or on the coast, very flat Western Australia. So being in the mountains and the forest and the snow is really unusual. And I feel like a little kid again, and it unlocks that just mystical awe. Like you said, it's always here. But the panoply of distractions in the modern day very easily just clouds that deep paying attention, really. We're just paying attention.
Yeah. I don't know. It'd probably be, I bet a lot of us, it's hard to, almost impossible to do by choice. But if we were back with sort of normal earth rhythms and seasons and we didn't have our phones anymore and we didn't have a lot of the stuff, it'd be interesting to see if a lot of our modern maladies start to go away. But that's not where we're at. We're at a place where we need to figure out ways to navigate this and integrate what we have going on. I don't wish for collapse as a means of moving forward. And that may be the only path. I don't know. But right now we're trying to kind of have a both and, where we figure out a way through. And that is something that is incredibly complicated. And I don't have the answer. But I know it is something to do with working from the inside out, from the individual and sort of the inner space. It's not going to come from the top down, right? The government figures out this new thing and then or science invents a new way of fixing this or that. It's like, well, it's not going to fix all the other problems. Like the futuristic era of the Jetsons that we're in, instead of having more leisure time, we seem to be busier. That was the promise all along. It's like, well, you won't have to do anything. And you'll just be sitting around and robots will bring you everything. And in some ways, here we are, and automation just is taking away our jobs, and we're scared of this, and what are we going to do? And there's discussions like universal basic income, and like, is that right or wrong? And then let alone like all the health issues from these things that we just don't even fully grok yet.
Yeah. Interesting conversations around that. The automation and the fear of that taking away a lot of jobs. There's been that every kind of leap of our humanity where things have gotten a little easier. At first, there's the fear, this is going to take away our jobs, but then there's the next movement where people become more creative and entrepreneurial.
Hopefully.
So, hopefully.
According to a lot of people, Andrew Yang, that presidential candidate, is all about that. It's like these jobs are going away quickly and you can see it happening. And so like all the trucking industry will be gone and a lot of anything that's repetitive labor will be gone. And so for a lot of these people, there just isn't a narrative for them about what do they do? And really just how do they make a living? These are important discussions because this stuff is happening. There's no way around it. I don't know. I'm not sure how that's going to pan out.
Yeah. Well, there's often the struggle, the chaos, and then the movement forward, so to speak. So yeah, we'll see.
It's not through just like subsidizing, I don't know, the coal industry or like keeping these things going, which is a lot of the promise people make, politicians, to keep voters. But that's just like putting your finger in a dam.
back to the power of sound. I
Sure.
mean, sound has been a huge part of my path. I remember at first when I started immersing in things like kirtan and things like sound healing, I had massive resistance. I was too active, too distracted, and it would actually provoke in me things like frustration and boredom and all of that. And then I had a really peak experience in India and a long immersion while we were there. We're doing a lot of Kriya and a lot of sound work. And we were just humming over and over and over again, just humming the Brahmari hum, which is a yoga Kriya. And something in me, like a bubble, popped.
Wow.
And it was blissful. It was a really blissful, peak, mystical experience. And from that moment, my appreciation of sound has just deepened more and more and more. And every opportunity I pick up a drum or a didgeridoo or something that creates that primordial drone or that hum that brings us back. And from that moment, I also feel the power of sound, like we touched upon just before, has that ability to wake us up very, very powerfully. So I know you do guided ceremony as well, don't you? And that's come in more of a yoga facilitating type thing. How are you finding being in teacher role now and bringing in the skills you have of a musician and then bringing that into a yoga and kind of medicine journey, so to speak? I don't know if you do it with the medicine and without, but how are you finding it in the role of teacher?
Well, there's been different aspects of it. I suppose when I'm playing or like an East Forest ceremony concert, which is something I've been doing more lately, that's more directly a mixture of concert and ritual where I'm guiding people through a concert that's also basically has elements of ceremony, guided meditation, and dharma, for lack of a better word. So that one I'd say is the most direct, like teaching. Whereas if I'm playing, if I'm accompanying a yoga class, I'm not usually saying anything because the teacher is doing all the stuff. So I'm really more in this like background role. And then it's more just about how the music directly works. I don't know. It's been an interesting transition over the last year. I definitely enjoy that space of being able to add words in addition to the music, but I'm always trying to find that balance. I mean, one thing that's great about the music itself is that it's more open to personal interpretation, especially when there aren't lyrics or words, because it sort of transcends the words. And that's a benefit. It's almost a little less arguable. Whereas if I start saying things, I have to be much more nuanced and careful about, because I want to build a bridge for people who maybe this isn't their normal space and sort of find a universal way in. And that's just my personal interest. I certainly could, I guess, just speak about my personal beliefs, and some people would resonate that. Some might be like, well, that particular word you use is triggering me, and this isn't really for me. This is all something.
Good to trigger people anyway, but keep going.
It's good to piss people off, no doubt. I'm not trying to make something bland, but what I am trying to do is reach with the ceremony mechanism, is like reach people who aren't the choir, because they need reaching out to. And I want to, because I think what I'm offering them from both a musical point of view and from the ideas is approachable. And if they will just open their mind a little bit and say, I'll give this a shot for an hour, I think they can have their own felt experience without that psychedelic. That could be quite profound for them. And it's just another step, another brick in the road for them. But that can be everyone needs that help. I know, like I said, for me, that some of those psychedelic experiences were really strong cracks in the nut, and I needed that. So I guess I'm trying to offer that in a legal way, in a way that's more approachable, that almost anyone could drop into. And I would hope most people could find some value in that.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. Speaking about another one of your albums that I love, Music to Die To.
Yeah. I just heard a mom came up to me a couple weeks ago at a gig, and she's told me her 5-year-old insists on listening to Music to Die To every night. And I was like, that's so funny. Not music to be born to. I was like, no, I need music to die to.
It's exquisite, man. Your main instrument is piano, yeah?
That's my primary instrument, yeah. And I fiddle around on a lot of other things, but yeah.
It's absolutely beautiful. And how did you get into that arena? Like, what inspired you to create an album, Music to Die To? As you would know, in our culture, the conversation around death is just most avoided. And of course, being with Ramdas and being around those conversations and his path of just being absolutely pioneering in that last phase of life and how to die consciously. Was that part of it? I'd love to hear about your journey.
Well, that was back in, I think, 2012, 2014? No, maybe, I don't know, maybe 2014 or something, that record. And it was created inside also the ceremony space, just like the Music for Mushrooms record, but I just took excerpts from that. And it was just something that I still think a lot about death. And I just think a lot about how a lot of the motivations of what we do in life is against that truth and against the knowledge of that. Maybe everything, whether consciously or unconsciously, is pitted up against that barrier and that constant. And so I kind of feel that getting closer to death or understanding or some kind of peace with it is the doorway to life. It's certainly the other polarity of birth. And so I just was trying to explore that. I tried things like volunteering in a hospice for a couple years to literally be closer to it. And it's probably around that same time. And so when I was developing those records, there was two records, sister records, that came out at the same time as Music to Be Born To and Music to Die To. Because to me, it was about this yin-yang, this polarity. And musically, they're pretty much the same. I guess to me, there's a feeling difference, sort of. But I wanted to be a little bold with those titles because it was intentional to kind of say, like, it's an affront. It's like, let's, face that. And then putting the birth one with it because it's an acknowledgement of, I think it was Eckhart Tolle maybe, I don't know, sort of saying that those are the opposites, but it's not death and life. Life is the constant. It's sort of like the egg that holds it all, but birth and death are the polarities. And so it's a different way of looking at it a little bit. Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah, we have a lot of work to do in our culture around death, and bringing those things to the forefront, to the conversation, is a powerful part in that. So good on you for being so bold to do it,
Yeah, I mean, it's not like, I don't know. It's sort of like when I make an album like Music for Mushrooms or something, sometimes those titles are not what you'd think traditionally are going to draw people in,
right.
But that has never been my interest. There's a song on the Ram Dass record about death. It comes out coming up here on the solstice, and it's called Like Taking Off an Old Shoe, aka Death, which is like a phrase that Ram Dass would say sometimes in his talks. And I love that idea that is a birth. I mean, that's tough. That's a lot of work. But death, I mean, it's no big deal. It's like taking off an old shoe.
Do you mind if we play that in the podcast?
If it's after the solstice, sure, go for it.
It will be.
Yeah,
It'll be in a couple months, so that'd be lovely to edit that in.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, put that right here.
From the ego, death is a stopping point. It's the end of the ego. The ego sees death as suffering, and the soul sees death as the awakening of a new world, a new perception. So you should identify with your soul in life. That will be the best thing for you to do, to anticipate death.
Beautiful. Yeah, and let's dive into Maharaji. How have you found this bridge from Ram Dass to Maharaji? Were you connected with Maharaji before meeting Ram Dass? Were you...
Well, I really see Maharaji as the one who's been guiding this whole process.
Yeah.
So obviously Maharaji, I never met him in person. He was someone that came into my life by, I was reading that book, Love Everyone. It's the one, I think it's the newer book about stories about people's meeting the Maharaji. And I was just in a really tough time in my life, going through the end of a divorce, and it's very dark. And I bought that book. I think I heard about it on the podcast with Raghu or something. And I bought it, and I was just reading it. And I realized it made me feel good. And so one of the stories in there talks about like a food cart guy in India who would have a picture of Neem Karoli Baba on his food cart stand because he said it's just good for business, just having a picture. Like, you know, there's just brings good fortune to you. So I thought, okay. So I went down and just did a Google search. The very first image that came up, I hit print, and I just stuck it up on the wall. And it was sort of, that started this interesting relationship energetically. It's a very famous photo where he's got his hand on his chin on his hand, and he's staring right at the camera. And it's a very powerful stare that kind of changes depending on the time and the hour you're looking at it. The energy he's giving you, whether it's sort of loving or comical or inquisitive or stern. And there was this communication that started. And I was sort of an invitation to say, look, I've been reading about you, and I could use some help. I could use some guidance, and I'm open-minded here, so let's see what happens. And now looking back on that, I never would have thought, like 2 years after that, I'd be sitting here with you talking about a record I made with Ram Dass and all these blah, blah, all this stuff. So it sort of is almost unreal that could even unfold. It seemed almost, I wouldn't even know what the path would have been to do that. So it's a lot of it's to Maharaji's, it's all to his grace. And a lot of the people that worked on it felt the same way. And what's nice about that is there's a bit of a letting go into trust of letting it just unfold as it needs to. I'll do my job, but I don't have to manhandle every detail. And that's been something really beautiful. And that was pretty new to me. You know, so it started, a couple years ago. And beautiful. It kind of culminated a month ago when we were at the retreat, and I was playing on the stage to play this music that we'd created, which was a total trip and honor in itself. But behind me was this 6-foot, huge, giant picture, the same picture of Maharaji. And the morning I was going to play, that morning I was getting my stuff together in my hotel room, and I had this backpack, and in the backpack there's like those inner pockets with the zippers, and in there I have like a little field recorder I carry around that I don't really use. It's just like in case something comes up and I want to record it. So it's basically a pocket, an area I do not access, and I probably hadn't pulled that out in many months. But I thought to myself just that morning, it's like, maybe I should see if I have batteries for that, because maybe I want to record today. So I pull it out, and in the pocket was a picture of Maharaji that it was not mine. And my Radha, my partner, is like, I swear to God, I've never seen that before. I did not put that in there. So I guess let's just say somebody put it in there. Fair enough. I don't know who, I don't know when, I don't know why. And there's no reasonable thought that I would see it at that point, if not months later. And of course I saw it like right as I was going to do this performance. And so these sorts of micro miracles are wonderful little nudges to kind of help keep you on the track and on path.
And his timeless teaching, love everyone and tell the truth. How's that going for you?
That's the last song on the record is called Love Everybody, and it's Ram Dass telling that little message and story. And I thought it was a great way to end the record, because we go through these 14 songs of all these different ideas and thoughts, and it's sort of, you end up with like, well, what do I do? And that was sort of the simplicity. Love everyone, tell the truth, serve everyone. I was just talking about this the other day with a friend, and the idea of telling the truth, very simple, but very difficult, because you could talk a long time about like, what is truth? And tell the truth to who? Other people, to yourself? Or, it's a really rich subject, and something that you have to make your own decisions about in a more creative way all the time. And that's what's such a beautiful teaching about that. Because what is truth? Your truth, someone else's truth. Is there such a thing as one truth? And you can't, does that mean to be confessional? Well, of course not. Do we tell, or what about all of our thoughts? Well, am I even in control of those? Is that me anyway?
So fucking deep.
It's a rabbit hole.
It's a rabbit hole.
Yeah. But it's beautiful because it's actually like if you just skip all that thinking about it, it's actually quite simple.
Very simple. And Ram Dass often shares about that predicament he was faced with when he was initially chewing on that teaching, when he was told, tell the truth.
I can't do it.
Tell the truth. And at that time, he was just getting pissed off at everyone because he was angry at everyone and just wanted to be with Maharaji. And Maharaji is like, no, love everyone and tell the truth. It's a predicament, and it's to be chewed on possibly for lifetimes or a moment.
Yeah. No, it's a great one. And I love that too, because a lot of those teachings are very universal. And I just feel like you can still be a Jew or a Christian or whoever, a Muslim, and these things could still apply to you. They're still just sort of what transcends the religion.
Yeah. One thing I do love about the Ram Dass community is not only has it bridged beautiful relationships such as this, and we just did a collaboration with another satsang friend, Durga Steph. We did a retreat with her in Mexico. It continues to open up really beautiful relationships, and just observing this kind of younger generation of the satsang really coming up and blossoming and bringing Ram Dass's teachings forth in really exquisite ways. Just observing that right now in what you're doing and this latest collaboration with Durga. Yeah, I love the Ram Dass community, not only these elders such as Ram Dass and Lama Surya Das and just all these beautiful, and Krishna Das and Mirabai, these elders. It's so, in the modern day of yoga and just the modern day in general, this kind of collective disrespect of elders that I see a lot. Disrespect of elders and pushing away of that.
Just not valuing the wisdom and how it could help them. So it's sort of just not, it's sort of a blind spot.
Yeah, blind spot.
Yeah, that's something that definitely comes up with this record. Is like, it's definitely, essentially, if you had to sum it up, it's an honoring of wisdom. And there has been a really large upswelling of interest, particularly in Ram Dass, in the last couple years from younger folks, like Instagram and so forth. And I think that's indicative of kind of the times. It's symptomatic in a way. And I hope there's some conscious effort put into thinking about, like, how do we build this bridge and transfer this energy to these younger generations, because it's happening. And it needs to happen with as much grace as possible because it's inevitable. And it's a way of translating something that is a bit of an old guard into something that can continue. Just like the Buddha wanted Buddhism to remain relevant to the time around it. So I think there's an encouragement by the Buddha to say, you need to like do what you need to do that's probably why there's all these different kinds of Buddhism. Of course, with these ideas too, it's they need to be contextualized. And so there's definitely a hunger to take that wisdom and to work off the shoulders of those giants. Yeah.
It's really beautiful to see. And the longevity in the Sangha, it's pretty rare. Many spiritual communities have a big blossoming and a big kind of communal heart-opening experience. But to have the longevity to go through the decades and
because I think it's something about that universal message of Ram Dass that, like I said at the beginning, the way it resonated with me is it was sort of transcending some of these different sects, and it was somewhat secular in a sense. I mean, it has a lot of Hinduism and Buddhism and all this other stuff, but it is somewhat secular, but still spiritual deeply. And I think that is going to be a very big force moving forward, particularly in Western culture, is this secular spirituality. I really, and it already is, but I see that being the main driving force of the younger generations and what they're interested in. Because they're interested in truth and felt experience and things that aren't like dogma from like a bunch of dead white guys. And I think, and especially hierarchy, it's irrelevant now. The internet has democratized ideas in a way that's like, you don't need that. The information now is available, And it's up to you to figure out how to have right livelihood and what to do with it. And there's a deep hunger for that. And that's shown by people like Ram Dass who've been doing this for quite a while. And so they have a deep well to share. And thankfully, he's been giving us these books and these talks that will live on for many, many generations. And I just hope that this record is just another part of that and another color that it paints with.
I believe that it will, and I'm excited to continue sharing it far and wide. It is a way of transmitting the indescribable. Even though Ram Dass is
mystery,
the mystery.
It's all just dancing around the mystery.
Yeah.
Yeah, he talks about the mystic poetry in a sense.
The mystic poetry.
That's all it's doing. Is we're all just all art is just sort of dancing around the mystery.
Mm-hmm. And music is such a powerful way to transmit it. So again, bringing his words, and it's I can't quite describe it, but the only word that comes is that amplifying. It just kind of almost like the sugar to make the medicine go down, the sweetness to chew on
the honey in the medicine.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking about that actually just the other day, and it feels like the combination of what he's saying with the music, beyond it kind of creates a field of energy. And that's just another description of trying to describe what it is. But it's more than just an idea, and it's more than just the emotional content of the music. It absolutely is amplifying the emotional content and what he's saying, a lot like a film score does. So it has that cinematic quality to it, because each of the songs is a little different depending on what he's talking about. It's trying to support the subject of what he's talking about. But I do feel that I'm hoping by listening to the whole record too, it will engender a certain feeling, cultivate something in you beyond just the intellectual ideas, that you feel a certain specialness or something from that. And there's a kind of alchemy just by listening.
And there's really power in listening to it from the beginning to the end.
I hope so. I'm still a believer in that process.
Because I think that's becoming pretty rare with the Spotify and whatnot. It's so easy. Attention spans are getting so low.
Yeah, it's here's another single, and then, oh, wow, it's just newness and novelty. But what will be interesting about this is the point of this is a bit of the kryptonite to that. It's to say, well, this can be a listening experience that isn't austere. It's actually going to be quite easy and enjoyable, and it has an arc and goes places, and there's variety. So it's quite approachable to go from beginning to end. And as I'm saying, I'm hoping people realize they'll want to do it, because I want to feel the way I feel. Sort of like after I do a yoga class, I feel certain things. Like after I listen to this record, I have a certain feeling, and so I want to put it on to. It's like you said, it's like a vitamin in a way, a medicine.
Just want to acknowledge as well, witnessing you and Radha, you work together a little bit and traveling.
Yeah.
How's that all going? Because I'm in a similar boat,
Great.
Yeah,
she's awesome. She's a huge resource. She's got a deep knowledge about yoga and Hinduism, and she's got masters in psychology, and so
even doing mixing for you. Is that what I was saying before?
We were just working on some copy for some press for the upcoming release.
Oh, great!
They ask for blurbs and words, and I'm just coming. She often copy edits stuff, and
that's helpful too.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest help is just having. For me, I'm someone who, when I have that kind of stability in my life, in my relationship, then everything kind of springs from that, and all my creative process. I'm not this story that some people have about you need to be tortured. And for me, it's the opposite. I need to feel grounded, rested, and everything else is good and stable. And then it's really helpful for me. Now I can go be creative. And so I really value what relationship can do. And relationship too is also, I find, the main crucible for spiritual work, really. I think the only other level there could be is if I had children. She has 2 children, but I mean, that I obviously am in their lives. But it's just a place where the rubber really meets the road, where you're seeing a big mirror of your stuff. And you could certainly not be in a relationship, and that's fine, and put that aside, but it's going to come up whenever you are. So it's sort of you can do it now, you can do it later, it's all good. But if you want to sort of be doing your work, that's a big way to do it. A big way.
Couldn't agree more. That mirror. And I've got 2 kids, and when I'm in a shitty mood, they're in a shitty mood. They're and it gets worse and it gets worse. And but if I'm doing my yoga of relationship, the yoga practice of that moment, I'm able to see the reflection. And instantly, when I can shift my awareness, they shift theirs.
You can give olive branches, right?
Yeah.
I mean, but it's all this stuff goes in waves, and any moment where you're feeling is going to change and shift, and so the good is going to change from moment to moment, and you really just have to recognize that all these things, everything really in life, is in these waves, and it's a very Buddhist point of view of just not holding on to those waves and not being attached to like, well, I always want it to be good. So good in quotes, because sometimes things are challenging. It's grist for the mill in a lot of ways. I was just hanging out with a friend the other day on the way here, and he had just like a hell of a last couple of years, and we haven't really seen each other, and just really burned the whole house down with the family, everything, money, everything. And probably went through some deep depression and medication, hospitalization. And I said, Charles Eisenstein is an author, someone I got to know, and he has this phrase that when people are really depressed or going through something big, he say, you know what? I want to say congratulations. It's like, you're a really brave soul. And I said, that's what I said to my friend. It's like, I see a brave soul. I see someone who choose to like really burn a big fire, and that's where you're at. And but I said, you probably feel like a lot of us that we're at the edge of what we can handle. And why would it be any other way if you think about it? Like if you're a soul and you're kind of saying, this is what I'm going to sign up for, of course you're going to get the most out of it. And certainly it seems like there are people who have lifetimes that it's like, it's easy street, but maybe they need a rest. I don't know. But for most of us, when we're facing challenges, it is going to be at that edge. But it's usually not over that edge. It might feel like it's over the edge at times, but it's riding that line, because that's where that friction is, where we can see where we've been and we can see where we're going, and we can do any kind of work. And that's why things go up and why they go down. That's sort of like the engine of our incarnation. And it's hard.
It's totally hard.
But it's also like, well, that's the playing field.
Well, as Maharaji would often say, suffering is grace, and I think that's where the practice of the yogi doing these austerities, of doing shit that is really challenging. Why would someone intentionally do something challenging? And it's to create those rites of passage, or the grist for the mill.
Well, practice is to work with the fact that there's suffering.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that phrase too about when you're really grieving, he says, yes, I feel closer to God though too, the closest. Right. And that's a really interesting perspective. And it might not take away the grief, and it's not that you're trying to take away the grief, so to speak, but it's acknowledgement that sense of fullness that you feel in the sadness or the grief, being closer to God. And it's a beautiful perspective and thought.
Yeah. Another satsang brother wrote the book Awakening from Grief, which is exactly that, and another huge teaching that we could utilize in our culture, rather than grief being swept under the rug. And I know I've observed in my just surroundings and the culture in Australia and America, that there's a common situation of just get on with it, grieve, and then get on with it, but
and I can understand that ethos, because in some ways, what else is there to do? But you have to grieve, and there's an emotional process there that can be very dangerous not to allow it to flow. Just for myself with divorce, I see how that comes in waves, smaller and smaller waves in some ways, but it's not linear. And anytime it comes up, it just sucks. It feels so gross and yucky. But at the same time, there's a part of me that has the awareness of like, well, allow this to feel it. Try not to just say like, what can I do to like push it away? And that is a nuanced dance to know like, how do I not add gasoline to the fire, but versus allowing it versus pushing it away.
Right.
There's not an easy answer there, but it's true. A lot of times if you go to get help, you might be helped. They might medicate you, which can literally just chemically push it away. and it'll probably come back to bite you in some other way. It's like a game of whack-a-mole.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And all the way even to the micro suffering, such as boredom and discontent with the phone phenomenon.
Yeah.
Often people are avoiding that feeling of boredom or discontent because we get that instant dopamine hit, and we're getting desensitized to what it is to be bored and discontent. But boredom and discontentment, that can be a great platform for meditation and contemplation and to
boredom's
start
a
again.
Modern affliction. I don't think that word probably existed, pre-industrial revolution
True.
or something. It's like, bored, what do you mean? When you have nothing to do and you're sitting there like, I don't understand. It's like,
Oh man, it's crazy.
That's most of life. I'm just sitting there.
Yeah. On our drive up here, because it was a long drive, we gave our 5-year-old an iPad to watch a movie.
Oh, I thought you were going to say Xanax or something.
But it's like Xanax. It's
yeah, absolutely.
It's crazy. It's fucking so toxic, and we try not to use it much. But for these long drives and having a little baby as well, you just got to pull it out.
Yeah.
But we know always after it, we're going to pay the price. Right. Always. And after it, even though we're driving through all these exquisite mountains, she's like, I'm bored, even though she's never seen snow before.
Yeah.
Like, look at the snow, like draw it,
She's
write
never
about
seen
it.
Snow?
No, we don't have snow in Western Australia.
Oh my God, did you take her to like a snowfield here? Have you done that yet?
We just got in yesterday, so we will.
Do that, yeah.
I mean,
snowball fight.
On the big island of Hawaii, she saw some snow on the top of Haleakala.
But she hasn't been in it.
Volcano though. Yeah. No, she hasn't been in snow yet. But we'll take her there.
I wonder if you can take her sledding on the mountain.
I think so.
That'd be amazing.
I think it'd be amazing.
Yeah.
But again, like that, even though she's such a beautiful and positive and like observant and just switched on girl, because of that iPad, a couple of hours of being on it, turn it off, I'm bored. This sucks, and we're in this new territory. It's crazy.
Yeah, I've seen some massive meltdowns with iPads and iPhones with kids. I really think they're just, because they're so pure, they're kind of showing us what it does. And we're kind of more like cool about it and we can cover it up. But as far as the trance it puts us in and the dopamine drug, they're just totally transparent about what's going on. And they're just like completely zombie out in 2 seconds. And I think when the iPhone came out, it was about 10 years ago. That was the next biggest revolution after the information age, when the internet came to be, and then before that, maybe the nuclear age, and before that, maybe industrial age, and before that, maybe like agriculture. It's like it was the next big turning point in humanity, the iPhone, the smartphone, so to speak. But it was Apple is what started that whole thing, and it's just incredible how fast it happened and how we all have pretty much the same device in our pockets. Did you see that movie, Her? Remember that movie, H-E-R?
No.
Oh, it's incredible. It's Joaquin Phoenix, and the music's by Owen Pallett, and it's supposed to be in the not too far future, and everyone has a device. And it was before we all really had them, so it was very prescient of the future. And anyway, they develop an AI. It's the first like intelligent, conscious operating system, and he falls in love with his phone. But we're like, they're in love.
Right.
And it's this whole, and Scarlett Johansson's the voice of the AI. And
I think I've seen a bit of it.
It's brilliant.
That rings a bell.
Absolutely brilliant. And it's amazing how we're kind of in that state where here we are. We all have the device. And when you're like New York City or something, 99% of the people are just have their face down with the earbuds on the subway.
Oh, dude, it's mind blowing.
It wasn't that way before.
No.
Maybe a book and a newspaper. Or just staring off in the or maybe talking to each other, friends chit-chatting. Yeah.
Yeah, this trip to LA, I hadn't been in LA for nearly a year, and we were just in LA for a couple of weeks before coming here. And things kind of happened there and New York before it happens other places, as you would observe, I'm sure, especially technology and materialism and all that.
Yeah.
And it was just another level of what I was observing with the phone thing, of just being locked in and the lack of spatial awareness. It was quite mind-blowing. From the last trip nearly a year ago to now, just bumping into me and my baby, and like it was full on, just in this trance and with the earphones in, just like on a full, Skype conversation or something like that, pretty much yelling and everyone's yelling.
Yeah, it's a really interesting time because
Quite
it is a
interesting.
double-edged sword. You know, I mean, there's a lot of these things that are quite helpful. Here we
Very.
are on a podcast. That's
Yeah, I wouldn't have been able to get in touch with you if it wasn't for it. What it would have taken before to hook something like this up.
Yeah, and like all the music I'm making is
Yeah.
largely with these new tools. But it's just super interesting, fast-paced time that takes a lot of personal strength and ingenuity to navigate. It really does. And there's no chart for this. Like we don't even know where it's headed. So everyone's responsibility is to be able to kind of make their own choices and realize the power of their own choices. That is the only way. You're not going to be told a good way to do it. You know, maybe smattering of stuff here and there, but you just have to figure out what works for you and be really honest about that. And everything that is happening on the tech side is working against you in the sense like they're using every trick in the book to mess with your psychology and your brain to literally hook you in.
Again, that double-edged sword, it's so useful. Any information you want right there.
I don't even know if you can't really opt out anymore.
Can't opt out.
I certainly can't, not trying to run a business and do what I do.
And so it's interesting in where it's going to go, because I remember when smartphones were first coming out, I jumped straight into it because I love toys and technology and playing around. But I did have friends that held off until relatively recently, but now they've got it. So it'd be interesting when, you know, the AI and the head chip and just all that becomes kind of normalized. I'd like to say, I'd hold off. I wouldn't want to put that chip in my mind. I'd want to, but if everyone's like got even more information availability there, even more like tuned in.
Mainline into all information of all time at all time, going into your nervous system as you choose. I'm not saying that's good, but it's going to happen, whether it's a contact lens or a chip. And I know it's being talked about. You know, I talked to people in the Silicon Valley in the industries, and there are meetings and discussions about planning ahead, and they're talking like 5 years. So it's like, I wouldn't be surprised if there's already like tests going on about, you know, how do you tap into the nervous system so you don't have to have this clunky device in my hand.
It is interesting as well. I know a lot of really switched on tech guys as well in Silicon Valley and whatnot, also diving deep into the psychedelic realms, doing DMT experiences and psilocybin.
Well, it goes
and
both
ayahuasca.
ways. You have one rising of this and another rising of the other. And
so hopefully there's a bridge where they bring in the connection to God or love or whatever we want to call it.
Well, we can't forget the technologies we've had for millennia, like ceremony and the rhythms of nature, and just discount the value that these have in our lives and how important they are for our psyche and our bodies. And that's the stuff I think we need to figure out how to honor that and integrate it into our lives. Like the concert I'm doing with East Forest Ceremony is a lot about the technology of ceremony and how simple it is, just like telling the truth is simple, but also how nuanced that is and how we already sort of unconsciously do it all the time in our lives, like rituals of brushing our teeth or writing a check. It's like, well, how can you do that in ways with other things that are helping to encode things into my subconscious, my unconscious, these deeper parts of my body and my brain to have a different narrative going and to have a different kind of life and different type of psyche going. And I don't, you know, that may come partially from an app or a practice, but I think it also comes from these tools that have been with us for forever. And as I was saying before, I think if someone unplugs, because if they had to, and they were just with natural rhythms of winters and summers and falls and springs, and they're just kind of maybe having the garden, and they're just kind of in it, and you're kind of back to like nature clock, it probably would solve a lot of problems, personal problems, I would guess. And I've heard that from certain people. And I live in a place where I witness friends who live like that by choice, and they have a very different speed. And not that that's a medicine for everybody. But
in Utah.
Yeah, southern Utah. There's something to be learned, though, from that. It's like, it's not probably going to be more. It's probably going to be a less.
I agree. And I think there's a situation of our circuitry. Things are moving so quick. And all the 5G and just EMFs galore. We've never been saturated with all of these new waves of energy.
Yeah.
Without a doubt, it fucks with our energy, our hormones, our circuitry.
I wish we knew for sure, because I'm really tired of like the misinformation and not being allowed. You sign your iPhone, you do the I accept bits, you get into those the deeper levels of those menus, and it says things like, do not hold the phone closer than 1 inch to your ear or something. And if you do, well, we're not responsible. You basically sign away. I mean, it says it right there. It's not like that. We just, even when like we found out through Snowden about the NSA doing what seems impossible, like every email you write, every phone conversation you have is recorded and it's on hard drives. Like, you're like, that's impossible.
How is that possible?
No, it's actually, we're like, well, I've heard that's probably true. No, like, no, it's happening. And then instead of everyone being like, oh my God, let's change everything, everyone just kind of shrugged and was like, well, you know, I got to use this and I need the Google Maps and I'm doing the thing and I don't really have much to hide, so let's just move on. And that's the way we've been.
Mm-hmm.
We just kind of accepted it. And right now, you know, we could be listened to, we could be watched, you know, and we know this. And then yet we're moving into smart technologies like Alexas and Google Home and Apple, whatever it's called, Home, where they literally, and we know the way it works, it just listens to everything and is waiting for the bits that it's supposed to give you answers to, but it's also building aggregate AI data based on basically how you live your life. You're putting giant microphones just like in your house. That's what the phone already is. This is the greatest spy device ever developed, and we willingly pay for it and put it in our pockets. It tracks everywhere we go, everything we do, everyone we talk to, everything we look at, everything.
Yeah.
And and even me, I'm just like, well, I kind of need it. I don't know how to opt out now without it, and it's super bizarre. So that's why things like the music and the practice and experiences I'm trying to make it's about that reconnection back into ourselves through nature, through slower rhythms, through the simplicity of just taking a break and pushing away the noise and trying to get in touch with that which is already there, as opposed to a new idea I'm trying to implant.
Yeah. Well, you're doing that beautifully.
Thanks.
And I would love to gradually wrap this up and let you get on with your sound check. I know you're playing tonight.
Yeah.
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 I can't wait to check it out.
Yeah.
It's an honor and a real
thanks,
privilege to be here. I really respect you and the work you're doing, and it's great to connect.
Yeah,
Is there
thanks for
anything you'd
taking the
like
time.
to mention with everyone where they can get in touch? And I'll, of course, leave links below and talk in the intro and outro about your work.
I mean, eastforest.org, not .com. So eastforest.org is just sort of the main space if you want to see tour dates or link up to whatever, the music. But you can certainly find it wherever you listen to music, and social media like Instagram and stuff. It's East Forest or East Forest Music. And we use those platforms like anybody else just to try to keep you informed. And I try to use them to create pause in life, but everyone's got their doorway in. So hopefully we'll meet you wherever you are. And hopefully I'll make it to Australia.
I hope so.
It's definitely on the list, but we are trying to find the right opportunity.
Thank you so much, East Forest. Much love.
Thanks. Appreciate it.